Hi there, guys, and welcome to another episode of the SDR DiscoCall podcast. I'm your host, Neil Buyan, and today's guest is Olivia Dorval, who is from Confluent. Me and Olivia had connected through LinkedIn, as I noticed you'd won a recent SDR award. But Olivia, how are you doing, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Neil. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks. Approaching Christmas.
Indeed.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining. And for the listeners that can see you and for the listeners that can only hear you, could you please tell us who are you currently, where are you, and what do you do, Olivia?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Olivia. I'm originally from France. I moved to the UK about 7 years ago. I did my studies in the University of Bath, and I started my career as an SDR about 2 years ago, working in software companies, but focusing on the retail side, point of sale finance. Then moved into Confluent, which is essentially a company selling software and even streaming platform that's based on Apache Kafka. So I'm not going to go into the details of that because it's a very technical product. But essentially, it's it's all about data infrastructure and allowing companies to leverage data in real time and make the most of their data.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Olivia. And just for the listeners out there, where are you based in the world today, Olivia?
I'm based out of London, central London.
In central London, in lovely Blighty. Thank you. And obviously, things that kind of stood out to me when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile is kind of what caught my attention was you won one of the top UK SDRs from Self Confidence, and you came in at number 8. So congratulations on that. How did you get involved with that award, and kind of what was it all about?
Actually, I didn't know about that award, and I was very surprised when I got it. I think it's my managers that were more involved than I was, but it was a very nice surprise to have. So certainly a great way of ending the SDR career since I'm moving to sales in January.
Well, if anything, hats off to the managers. And yeah, it's always nice to get some good news when you win an award and you didn't even know about it. But as you mentioned, there is some news that we're going to let the listeners know shortly, which is some exciting news for you. But kind of like starting with your SDR story. So when I was looking at your LinkedIn, I saw that you kind of started out in retail sales many years back. You've been through a journey through different other companies, kind of thinking about your career, and then ended up at Confluent. Olivia, what's the story like starting right from the beginning, from like retail sales, university? How did you get to Confluent?
Yeah, so when I was at university, it's common in the UK to do a 1-year placement where you work for 1 year in a company of your choice and you do what we call a placement year or an internship. So I did my internship and I worked for a company called SimCorp, which is essentially software for investment banks. And I was working as a field marketing associate. So everything, if you know about field marketing, it was basically generating leads for sales. So if everything related to organizing events, organizing webinars, organizing campaigns, leveraging all the CRMs and Salesforce to invite prospects to different campaigns that we would run and then generate leads and push them to sales. So the beginning of the funnel. And I really liked it. But basically what I realized when I was at SimCorp is that I could see my colleagues. We were sitting next to sales and I could see my colleagues that were going in client meetings, taking client calls. And I really missed on my side that client interaction. I thought at uni that marketing would be very interactive and that you would have a lot of interactions with clients, but actually in B2B, you don't have that much. So when I finished my placement and I went back to uni for my final year, I realized that after uni, I really wanted to have to work in a client-facing role. So that was my key priority. Then there's different client-facing roles out there, as you might know. So there's SDRs, there's sales, there's account management. So there's a lot of different options. I found that SDR, it's difficult to get an account management position, for example, with no experience. So I found that SDR was a very good way of starting in a client-facing role. And then you can, based on what you like and what you want to do, decide what your path is and what you want to do, if you want to do proper new business sales or account management.
Wow. And you've raised a really good point there, because I think a lot of us come into a sales development role because we naturally want to progress into sales. And I've had a lot of guests say the same. But where you said that you can kind of start this role, see how the other departments work, You can see how customer success works. You can see how sales works as well. And then see if it's a career path that you want to go on to. So if I get it right, you were doing marketing, but you found that you wanted to do something more client facing. You were thinking about the account management side, but then you saw that, okay, without the experience, if you go into the SDR role, that will kind of give you the experience that you need if you wanted to move that way. Is that right?
Yeah, I knew that. I mean, SDR is a job that opens a lot of doors after it's entry level. So I know SDRs that went into marketing, that went into, I know some that want to go into sales engineering, that there's a lot of different options after. On my side, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after SDR, whether it was sales or account management or something else. So I thought, I'll see how it goes and I'll see what I want to do later.
Perfect. Love it. And with obviously, like within sales development, like you said, it's an entry position. And in my opinion, you're doing elements of marketing, you're doing elements of sales, you're touching different parts into one role. How did it feel like going from that marketing sort of role into a sales focused role? Like what things did you notice were different, like being on the other side of the fence?
Yeah, there are some similarities, but it's very different. When you're in marketing, you stay in the marketing mood in a way where you're going to send emails out that are more visual and it's more general campaigns. Whereas in sales, you are really trying to, I mean, as an SDR, you're really trying to sell a meeting and to get an opportunity open. So it's just very different. Marketing has also a lot to do with just raising awareness on the product and raising awareness on the value that we bring, especially when you sell open source technologies like we do at Confluent. But in sales, the movement is very different. You're literally just trying to get an opportunity out of the contacts that you're making.
Got it. Love it. And I think it's always good to kind of, like you say, have a bit of experience, see how the two different departments work. But as you said, they're all working towards the same goal. One is trying to get the awareness and the other one's trying to take that interest and then move it into an actual sales opportunity. What techniques did you learn from marketing that you actually like incorporated into your sales development role?
I thought that to be honest, I would think that I learned most of the tips on the sales job, on the sales role. A few things maybe that I picked up in marketing is I was organizing events, and to make sure everyone would attend, I would call everyone and try to make sure that they would actually come to confirm the numbers. So like get rid of the fear of the phone maybe a bit in that sense. But otherwise, I would say that I learned on the job starting the SDR role mostly. And reading some books as well. So when I transitioned into the SDR role, I read quite a few books before starting, so I had an idea of what to do.
Love it. And are there any sort of book recommendations that you would give? Say if somebody was thinking, okay, maybe this is a journey I want to go. What kind of like were key books for you, Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, so behind me, I've got quite a few. There's all my sales books, but fanatical prospecting, predictable prospecting, that were ones that really stood out to me when I started. And new sales, like for people that are a bit more advanced and that are a bit further in the road. New Sales Simplified, I was recommended by a manager that I worked with, and also the Challenger Sale. And now I've been recommended How to Control the Sales Process, something like that. But fanatical prospecting and predictable prospecting would be my go-tos for just starting, because it's just focusing on prospecting.
Love it. And do you know what? You're, I think, like the fourth guest now that's been telling me about fanatical prospecting, and I made an omission in the last show. I still haven't read it. It's not one that I've got to, but I have asked Santa to put it in my stocking this year because, again, if so many people are going on about it, there must be something good in it. But what were your key takeaways from this book, would you say, that kind of helped you from fanatical prospecting? I'm just curious to know.
God, it was 2 years ago, but I think it just gives the basics, on what prospecting is, and basically it tells you that prospecting is key for any salesperson, that you really need to prospect all the time. So basically, if you want to become a salesperson, being an SDR is so important, because it teaches you one of the most important skills, like pipeline generation. And it's like, in some ways, sometimes it's a bit of an old school book, because it's still like its focuses a lot on old school techniques, like direct mails and cold calling and stuff, but it's the basics. So I would say that it does a good job at teaching you the basics of prospecting, and that cold calling is dead, that all those types of things, and gives you tips as well, quite practical tips on how to organize your time, blocks in the diary, all those types of things that are quite important when you start as an SDR.
Definitely. And I think we all learn differently. So like with me, I'm more a visual learner. I love to watch videos and listen to stuff. Some people do like to read books. And you made a very valid point. And I think it's something that was brought up this year around like playbooks, especially SDR playbooks. And like you say, they can be a bit old school. They can be outdated, but there is still valuable knowledge that you can still take, like you said, basics, techniques. And then I think it's good to kind of like adapt that to kind of what's working today. So if that's the type of emails or the cadences that you may be sending out, but time management is key. Like even today, as somebody that doesn't really do SDRing in as much as I used to, time blocks as to when I do stuff and cutting out hours in the day to learn and do other things is key. Otherwise I'd be all over the place, right? But kind of coming back to like the career journey side of it. So before you joined Confluent, what was the journey like just before there? I saw there was a few companies that you're working at and some experiences you had.
Yeah, so I started to work for Divido, which is a company selling a software platform, point of sale finance. At the time when I joined, it was selling the platform to retailers. So I literally just joined. My manager, James Buckley, is awesome. So we're still in touch now. It was amazing to work there. And I just like hit the ground up. I didn't really know, like I just read few books. I didn't have so much training. So I was just like, okay, off you go. Trying to build some Excel sheets of contacts that I want to contact, and just writing some messaging, adding people in sequences, doing some vertical based messaging. Like I just tried things out myself. And it was going very well. And then there was a change of strategy at the company. So that's part of the life of startups, I would say.
Yeah.
And they had two segments. They were selling both to banks and to selling the platform to banks for them to integrate their platform onto retailers' website. And the other side was selling directly to retailers. They changed strategy and they decided to focus solely on banks. So I was on the retailers part. So most of my team was unfortunately made redundant.
Oh.
And so I was offered to stay. I was given a role. So I stayed for another few weeks, but then it wasn't the role I originally wanted. It wasn't a sales role. It was more of an operations role.
Yeah.
So I stayed a few weeks, and then I decided to leave. And my manager, James, as well, decided to leave at the same time. And he joined one of the Divido's, the company's partner that was essentially reselling their platform. So it was the same job, the same product. And he asked me if I wanted to come with him. And obviously I had just done the job for 4 months. So there was still a lot that I didn't do and I was still learning. So I said, yeah, he was also an awesome manager. So just like, okay, I'm just going to follow you and we're going to build this thing together.
Nice.
And I worked there for about 6-7 months, but I always had in my head, I wanted to go into more complex, sales, like longer sales cycle, because it was quite a simple product. So some people really would like it. It's a bit more fast paced in that the velocity is quicker, like to book meetings, to close deals, everything's faster. But I know I was reading a lot of books that I mentioned, that were really teaching about the value based selling but that was more applicable to more complex sales cycle, more complex technologies involving a lot of stakeholders in companies that are a bit longer to manage. So I wanted to do that. And long story short, I was introduced to someone by someone to Confluent, and I did the process. And yeah, I landed a job last summer, so 1.5 years ago. And it's been 1.5 years. Started Inbound because it's an open source company. We have a lot of inbound leads coming in. So my job was essentially to qualify and contact all the people that would download something on our website, or go to an event or something like that. Contact everyone in a timely manner, or recontact all leads and qualify them, trying to understand if there's an opportunity or not. Book a meeting for the salesperson. And last year in January, I moved to Outbound, which is working strategically with the sales team on specific set of enterprise accounts for building pipeline generation.
Well, that is a journey and a half. And again, hats off to James if you're listening or watching this.
Yeah.
He was like your passport to help you get through into the next place. But you said a really interesting piece there about obviously there are some like SaaS platforms or products where it's a relatively quick sales cycle. It could be, I don't know, either from 4 weeks to like 3 months max. But what you were reading at the time was about complex enterprise sales. So where the value could be much higher in price, it could be a longer sales cycle. And from my understanding, with complex SaaS sales cycles, you may be talking to more than maybe 3 or 4 different decision makers. You may be touching different business units within there, and your solution may be able to help so many different departments. So it's like you say, it's a more complex sell. But what was the driving force of wanting to move from a fast-paced product to a more complex? What was the interest there and why?
To be honest, I don't really know. It's like a internal drive. I think that I really wanted to do that. And also it was like the more you sell based, like the higher the price of your product, the more you have to sell based on value. And that's where you have the most interesting conversation. But that's just in my own opinion, obviously. So I just really wanted to do that and, be engaged with, like high level stakeholders discussing their strategic initiatives, all those types of things that you can do and you can relate to when you sell a product based on value. And I felt like I wasn't really able to do that. It's also the world of point of sale finance it's very crowded in terms of the competitive landscape. And
Yeah.
what you'll find is when it's very crowded, there's not so much among the different providers, there's not so much differentiation in terms of how you differentiate yourself from other competitors. So everything comes down to price. And even though you try your best, since you take a percentage of each transaction that goes through a retailer's platform, if the percentage that you take is higher than the retailer's margin, there's not much you can do. They're going to go to the competition that's cheaper. So it's not very interesting from a human, point of view in terms of for a salesperson.
I love it, and I can definitely relate. I think when I was at my first startup, Zora, the way that we were trained as SDRs is that we had to sell to the 5 people in the room. So it was like the CEO, the CFO, CTO, CIO, and CMO, and product guys as well. So I had to learn very quickly that they all have different departments, they have different wants, they have different strategies. And it was a case of we needed to be able to have different conversations throughout the sales cycle with these different departments, learn how they work, and then try to demonstrate why our solution, which was very expensive compared to the competition,
Yeah.
as to why it's going to bring them all together. And I think the thing that I could take away, and I don't know if you agree, is it was more challenging, but it was so much more rewarding when something came into fruition through all
It
those
is,
sort of
yeah.
discussions. Yeah. And to your point, I know that you're a very strategic person. It's not just a one outbound email or a couple, and then book the meeting and demo, it's closed. It could take 6 to 9 months. I think my longest outbound play took me 3 years because
Yeah.
it took so long. But when it did come in, it came in at a high value, and I was super excited and proud of it. But definitely, I think enterprise sales is definitely a good step for people to get into. But I think that experience of learning, like you say, a fast-paced product where it may be less decision makers, less of a process, it gave you a good footing, and now you're in somewhere where you have to be strategic and enterprise focused,
Yeah,
right?
it teaches you the basics, like the base of, the SDR job, what to do, how the process. The process is the same everywhere, so it's
100%.
yeah.
Love it. And as you said, you came into Confluent, you were doing like an inbound role for the first year where you were contacting like the marketing qualified leads, making sure they were all touched, and then you moved out into an outbound position that you've been doing for a while. A lot of the SDRs that we speak to, they are predominantly outbound SDRs, but I think some of the listeners and viewers may also be new to inbound. Being the ex-marketer that you are and doing that inbound role, what kind of tips would you give for like being an inbound SDR?
Being an inbound SDR is completely different from being outbound. So when you're inbound, you're more reactive. Whereas you're more proactive when you're outbound. So as an inbound rep, you have the leads coming to you. And I don't know, it depends on the company, but we had such a huge amount that for us, the challenge was to understand which one of those should we spend time on, which one of those are actually good leads that have potential to buy. So that was the hard thing. But as an inbound rep, I think the key thing is to have a strong process and to you have leads coming in, you need to contact them in a very timely manner. You need to sequence them, you need to call them, you need to make sure that you have a proper sequences in place for contacting all those leads, and that you don't miss any step and that you don't miss any lead. And you also can be proactive on the side. So on my side, for example, what I was allowed to do was outbound, inbound prospecting. So for example, if you have an inbound lead coming from a company, you might be able to if it's a good company, you might try and see if there's other people in that company that you can go after, or doing campaigns to revive previous inbound leads from the previous year or from previous events or something like that. But the key difference is just that it's more of a reactive job, and that you'll have more calls as well. The goal is to have calls. You have more calls when you're inbound, because a lot of inbounds might want to just take a call with you because they've downloaded something. So there is some interest there. So it's being a bit more tough as well on qualification than if you're outbound.
Agreed. And I love that piece that you said there. So that's something I used to do as an SDR, where an inbound lead would come in. The first thing I would do is obviously send them an email within the first 5 to 10 minutes of them, requesting content from our site. But then I'd search my CRM to see, do we have any other leads from that company?
Yeah.
And then I would convert that into an account. I would add as many people. I'd send them outbound emails. So it's kind of like a hybrid role of doing inbound and outbound at the same time. And a question I'd love to ask you, because I saw this on LinkedIn the other day where somebody says, when an inbound lead comes in, like how soon should we contact them? Because, we have leads that come through to our website. They've downloaded an ebook or a white paper. Then they get the SDR reaching out and say, hey, Olivia, I see that you've recently been on a website and you downloaded this. Is there anything I can do to help you? And sometimes I've heard SDR saying, well, they've only downloaded an ebook, or, you know what, I don't think I need to reach out to them now. But when you reached out to somebody who had downloaded content, what was the way that you went into that email or kind of call from an inbound perspective?
First of all, I want to say that I wouldn't really retract from sending something to someone straight away. They've downloaded something, so it's more likely that it's on their mind and they're more likely to answer. So I would do it as fast as possible. I think we had some numbers internally that we found that the response rate is much higher if you schedule the leads within 15 to 20 minutes versus if you wait for 1 hour. So we definitely have to be very timely on that. And for sure that it's true that, they might just downloaded an ebook. Like I would download something just out of interest. But I really believe that SDRs, we're not just there just to book meetings for us. We're here to help the company, to drive awareness on the product. And also someone that downloads something out of interest today might change company in 2 months and work on a project. So you always need to be nice and send people emails and just in a nice way. You don't have to be salesy at all, but just saying something like, hi, John, just so that you downloaded our ebook on, whatever. Thanks so much for your interest. I'm part of the user success team here. And just want to understand a bit more about what you're working on, try to understand if there's anything that we can do to support you. Would you have 5 minutes for a chat over the next few days? Or you can formulate it in any way, but I wouldn't sound salesy. I would keep it very short, but I would still send something out so that at least later, if that person has questions, they can come back to you.
100%. And I think from the show transcript we'll get, guys, you've got Olivia's template there of how to respond to your inbound leads. And I think that's beautiful. I love it. Like you said, you don't want to come across too salesy, but you want to kind of be that person at the front door that if they want to come into the shop and they want to ask any questions, they have your details. And the technique that I used to use with inbound SDRs would be like, hi, Olivia, I see that you've recently come through to our website. You've downloaded our content. People that I normally speak to fit into 2 buckets. A, they're just researching and they're trying to get understanding of how we could potentially help, or they're actually looking for something to help them with a certain project. I just wanted to know, Olivia, which bucket do you fall into? And here I could understand, okay, what am I going to prioritize? A, for the people that are just researching, I would put them on a nurture campaign. Or B, if they were looking for something, my follow-up would be, okay, well, here's my calendar. Let's book in a time.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. And it did help a hell of a lot, because I think sometimes we're like, do they want to talk to us? Do they want to have a meeting? I don't know. They're just researching, and we can overthink it. So I think let's help out the prospect by asking them which path they're on.
Very good idea.
Thank you. And moving into the outbound role, so I know you're a person of strategy, and you like to do things strategically. Like, explain to us, like, what's Olivia your outbound strategy? How did you work as an outbound SDR?
Uh, well, I work very strategically with the salespeople that I'm assigned to. Then what I can do, if you want, is I can give you some like key takeaway tips or something like that from this year as outbound.
Please do.
Uh, yeah. So basically, what I realized is that like SDR, in essence, it's not a very complicated job in terms of what we have to do, because we just have to book meetings and qualify meetings. Qualification might be a bit more tricky, but anyway, booking meetings, it's a very simple act. But then it's just how to do it that's a bit more tricky, I would say. And what I found when I look back at my year in outbound is that it's just about doing the basics right. And it's nothing crazy. It's nothing out of the box. It's not reinventing the wheel at all. But basically, what I mean by basics is what you have to do is constant prospecting. As an outbound, you have no one really behind you that's telling you what to do. You're a bit like, I don't know if people listening have done the SDR role or not, or if you're thinking of joining, but basically you're a bit like autonomous. So you don't really have anyone to tell you what to do every day. So you're very free, which for me, I personally love. I love the freedom of doing what I want to do every day and setting up my own schedule and calendar. But it's up to you to stand up and, to be proactive and to do a lot of activity every day, contact a lot of new companies every day. And when I say constant prospecting, it's basically adding new prospects into your cadences every day. So it's not just following up on the people that you've been speaking to, but it's also making sure that you add new fresh contacts every day into the sequences that you're writing. I would emphasize great messaging. That's a key thing for being successful as an SDR. So, and for me, that's a very interesting piece. It's really trying to understand your product, understand your customer, and trying to phrase or position your product or what you're trying to sell based on your client's interests. Like what are their strategic initiatives, what keeps them up at night, what do they want to hear about. So it's really researching, and it can take a long time, but once you get the hang of it, after it gets quicker. But that's very important. And the right people. So doing proper research on sending the right message to the right people. So you can have amazing messaging, but if you send it out to the wrong people, then it just doesn't really make sense. So I would really say that's key. And one more thing is really building very good relationships with the salespeople that you're working with as an SDR. So I've built amazing relationships with my AEs, and now we're almost friends. And I know that as I go into sales, I'll still be in touch, and I can ask them for tips in my next sales role, because I know I'll have things that I don't know and I need training on. And so it's always nice to know that the AEs that you've been working with for a long time will help you in your next step. And that doesn't come it comes with hard work and with providing them with good meetings and, helping them build pipeline. But it's really fundamental, I would say. And they can also help you out if you're struggling to meet targets here and there. Yeah. So it's very good to have a good relationship with them, I would say.
Très bien. I love it. And I think you said like a very important piece is like, as this outbound SDR, you have to be, like you said, autonomous. You have to be self-sufficient. There isn't going to be somebody that will say, right, Olivia, you need to go do this. You kind of got to figure it out. And I love that freedom as well, because I used to say to SDRs, like, you are like the CEO of your own territory and patch. Like, here's your opportunity to create a business plan, a strategy, kind of sit down with your AE, like plan these accounts and see how it's going to go. You're going to test, you're going to try, you're going to fail, you're going to reiterate and try it again. I think, you constantly have to be prospecting, even though, like I said, I'm not an SDR. I still have to keep prospecting for my business, for guests for this show. I have to use my SDR techniques there. And as you say, like, as you're progressing into the next role, learning from your A's, so building that relationship, like you said, you're almost like friends now, so that when you transition, you know that you've got people to call on to help you out, because you've still got things to learn. Like we never stop learning. And that brings me on to like the good news as well. So you mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is the last day of something and you're about to transition into something new. What is the big news, Olivia?
Yeah, I'm moving to sales in January.
Woohoo! So
Thank
congratulations.
you.
And so obviously, like you said at the beginning, you were working in the marketing piece. You wanted to go into account management maybe, but now you're progressing into this sales role because you didn't know then, but now you do know where you want to go. What was that deciding factor for you to progress into the sales role, Olivia?
Actually, I really took some time to think about it because at some point, I just wasn't sure, and I think it's okay to not know. But what helped me realize, so I sat down with some of my colleagues in the account team. I sat down with sales. I talked with different people. I asked people's advice, and what I realized is basically, I'm in a mindset. First of all, I'm very competitive, so that's one thing. And also, I just realized that, for example, if I were to be given an account as an account manager, and I uncover an opportunity or potential for selling, for an upsell or something like that, and I have to give this away to the salesperson, I would just be so upset personally.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Like I was like, okay, well, if I'm reacting this way, it surely means that I should be sales. And what I enjoy most is also like selling the value proposition and that overall big picture that you're selling as a salesperson when it's strategic sales, rather than being involved in the day-to-day management of an account.
Hmm.
So I realized that, and that really helped me out. But I think for anyone that is hesitating, you really have to talk around you and ask a lot of people and shadow calls of account managers, of salespeople, and just like try to be in their imagine you're in their shoes and try to think, in which shoes you would want to be yourself.
That's great advice. And I think, like you said, you didn't really know where, but you took the time to do your due diligence. You sat down with people, you saw the different departments, you saw emotionally how you felt about it, and that kind of helped you make the decision of where you want to move forward. And again, congratulations on taking that sales role. But obviously, that probably wasn't like an overnight decision or thought process. Like, how long did it take you to come to that conclusion?
Probably from February, like three months, something
Yeah.
like that. One piece of advice also that was given by one of the senior leadership team in EMEA in Confluent was that it's also easier to move from a sales role to account management role than it is from an account management role to sales. So it's easier to go into sales, and if you realize it's not ready for you, you can move into account management. The other way around is a bit more tricky. So
Agreed. And I did exactly that. I always wanted to be in sales. I got into sales and I realized I don't want to be in sales, but I still love customers and relationships. So I did make that transition into customer
yeah,
success, and
exactly.
I was so much more happier there. But like you said, it's not a bad thing not to always know where you want to go, but as long as you explore those sort of areas, have those conversations, I think, like you said, it can help you come to a conclusion in 3 months. That's like a quarter. That's a good time to kind of mull these things over. So again, well done for doing that. So as we're coming towards the end of the show, you've given a hell of a lot of good takeaways. But for somebody maybe who's about to embark on this journey or think about entering the world of sales development, what 3 tips would you give to a younger version of yourself, Olivia?
I think you just have to think whether it's a job for you. I don't think everyone likes the SDR job. I personally I love it myself, but I don't think it's a job for everyone. And the truth is, you do get a lot of rejection. It's not easy every day because you do the sometimes you just do the same thing over and over again. Like every job, it is repetitive, but you have like the target for meetings, you have some pressure from your manager, you have the repetitive tasks. So you just have to be someone that's quite, I would say, positive, and that is very determined and has some grit, so that you don't let yourself down after, if you get like 3 days of rejections, because that happens. So just really try to think this way, if um, if uh, if that's a job for you or not. Then if you think it is, for me, like my key tip is just consistency. because that's one of the hardest thing to do, but it's one of the most important once you're in the SDR job, is try to be consistent on doing the basics right. And really, it's not that all complicated. Like if you feel lost or you don't really know, oh God, there's so much to do, what should I do? Like, it's not a complicated job, and our job is just to contact the right people, sending them the right message, and doing this consistently. And like, if you remember this to yourself, if you don't really know what to do, I find like it's a good anchor. And the last thing that's more related to planning, I think that's something that I managed to do quite well over the past 2 years, is to have a very strong process and planning for my week and for my targets. So to try and achieve targets on a regular basis every quarter, I would really try to, so that it's less overwhelming, bring it down. So if you have, for example, a quarterly target, think, especially if you're starting and you know it's a bit overwhelming, think, okay, I have this quarterly target. How many meetings do I need per month? How many meetings do I need per week? How many meetings do I need per day? And for those meetings per day on average, like, okay, so how many emails do I need to send? How many calls do I need to make? And then if you kind of keep yourself accountable, for example, for 50 new emails out every day, and like 15, 20 calls every day or something like that, and you keep this consistently, even though you don't get results on some days, overall it should come down. You should get the results. Like, there's no real, it's not difficult. You put in the activity, you'll get the results if you get the right messaging and the right people. But I guarantee you that if you put the activity, you get the results.
100% agree. And I love it. It's that whole reverse engineering of just stop looking at the bigger number, but break it down, like you said, by the weeks, by the days, and how many activities you should do. Yeah. And I'd always say to, like, when I was an SDR manager, I said, look, if I see a lot of activity, but you're low on the target, it shows that you're at least trying. And if I see that you're at towards target and less activity, then I'm not worried, because, you're going to hit your number. But if I see not much activity, not much target, then we have a problem, and let's sit down to discuss it. But those are some great bits of advice. And I can only assume, Olivia, that when you get your SDR, that's the sort of advice that you're going to be able to give them, right?
For sure, yeah. And just on the last point, in terms of the planning, so for example, one of the tips that I could give you is to really, like, I always taught myself, okay, I considered my monthly target, even though officially I'm targeted quarterly. I never allowed myself to be below the monthly target, or to think, for example, oh, I'm taking 2 weeks now off. Well, it's okay, I'll just make up for it next month. I'm always in the mindset that I'd rather front load and then, be a bit more relaxed, or plan and have more meetings for the next quarter rather than be behind. So just always try to be ahead and not behind, so that you can either relax, or what I was doing that worked quite well in the long run is you basically try to achieve quarterly target by the last 2 weeks before the end of the quarter, and then you have 2 weeks to chill a bit, relax, but you can also plan and set some meetings for the next quarter, so that you start the next quarter with already some meetings, and it takes the pressure a bit off than the big zero on the dashboard. That everyone knows.
Totally agree. And I love that. It's like you say, like, what I would say to SDRs is, like, in the first 2 weeks, like, build out those activities for that month to try and hit that number. And in the last 2 weeks of the month, I'm thinking about the following month already.
Exactly,
Like,
it's all about planning.
It is. Always be planning, always be building, always be prospecting, and that will leave you in a safe place. But great bits of advice. And do you have any shout outs that you'd like to give on the show today?
I mean, there are so many, but maybe a couple. So shout out to James, my previous manager, to Willie, my manager at Confluent. That's absolutely amazing as well. So I've been very lucky to have 2 amazing managers, and to my dad, who is sales as well. And who's taught me a lot, and always, read some of my emails when I wasn't sure whether it was a good email. So shout out to him as well.
I absolutely love it. There's a lot of guests that we've had that have had family in sales, and they're able to bounce off ideas, and it's great that you're able to do that as well.
Yeah.
Well, Olivia, like again, congratulations on graduating from the SDR role. We wish you all the best luck in the new role. But as you're going to be in the A role, we don't know if we can have you back. But maybe in the future, a cool idea is when maybe you get that SDR, we bring you and that SDR onto the show for like a bit of a dynamic duo to see, okay, how good of a teacher is Olivia? And I'm sure it'd be absolutely amazing. So let us know how it goes. But we'd be watching you. And if there are any people out there that would love to get in contact with you, just to ask you questions about the SDR role, etc., what's the best way to get in touch with yourself, Olivia?
I mean, the best way is just send me a LinkedIn invite with a note, and we can chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, Olivia, again, we're in December 2020. If we don't speak to you before then, I wish you a happy Christmas, a happy New Year, and most importantly, happy selling.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks again for having me.
No worries.